My name is Eric Schwarzinski, and you're listening to episode number 15 of Gut Reactions. In 1996, Wes Craven's Scream debuted in theaters, revitalizing the horror genre, one that had become stagnant with formulaic slashers, tired cliches, and sequel after unoriginal sequel. Craven's revolutionary film wasn't afraid to poke fun at the genre stereotypes audiences had come to know so well, but it never delved into pure parody. It was a respectful and analytical reflection on a genre that had gripped the 80s so strongly. Audiences loved it, so much so that the $14 million film would go on to gross over $103 million in the US and over $173 million worldwide. As is often the case when a film is successful, several imitators came soon after, mimicking the quippy, self-referential style found in Scream. Until the mid-2000s, self-aware teen slasher after self-aware teen slasher poured into theaters. Some good, but mostly not so good. One of the few worthwhile films to come out during this run was released just a year later. In 1997, an adaptation of Lois Duncan's novel, I Know What You Did Last Summer, was released in theaters. Starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, who had just launched to superstardom with her hit show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Ryan Phillippe, and Freddie Prinze Jr. The film nearly recouped its entire production budget during its opening weekend. The film may not reach the heights of Scream, but it's a satisfying thriller with plenty of memorable moments. On today's episode of Gut Reactions, I'll be discussing I Know What You Did Last Summer. Typically at this point of the show, I discuss what I've been watching lately, but I haven't had a chance to watch any movie or show, so I'm going to dive right into the topic. But first, there is something I have to talk about. The new Halloween trailer.
Everyone in my family turns into a nutcase this time of year. Yeah, I mean, your grandmother is Laurie Strode. She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
What the hell did you do that for?
So I can kill him.
Yeah, I'm super cautiously optimistic about Halloween. Obviously, with Blumhouse producing, that gives me a lot of hope. They've had a lot of hits with the horror films that they put out and the franchises that they've been running. Of course, they've had their misses too, like this year's Truth or Dare. But overall, it's a company that I really trust. They're putting out some of the best horror films around right now. Jason Blum makes some really good decisions. It seems like the crew involved really loves the franchise and has an original direction for it. It's nice to see John Carpenter signing off on it, and there's just a lot that really makes me optimistic here. I'm kind of nervous, if anything, in the new trailers is just the new cast, but not so much because they look bad in the film. We haven't seen enough contextually to really judge that. But just because they're unknown, Jamie Lee Curtis is kind of always going to give her best shot. I mean, she was the best part of even Halloween Resurrection. She's always going to be good. I'm just curious to see how the new cast really holds up. I think it's interesting that she's kind of taking on the Sam Loomis character and warning a new generation of people about, the evil that's been unleashed. Just one or two other things from the trailer that I really liked was kind of the Silence of the Lambs aesthetic of the mental asylum and just kind of that vibe there. I love the huge tiled floorway. If you haven't seen the trailer, just the aesthetic of the actual kind of mental institution that he's in. And I'm really interested to see how much of the film we get to spend there. I hope we get to see some of the escape and things there. And I love that it pays tribute to the Carpenter-esque wide-angle shots where you can kind of see the curvature of the lens on the sides in some of the frames, how wide it gets. I think that's a really good way to kind of tie it in with the 70s where that style was really in vogue. And then lastly, just the gags that pay homage. You have the road filled with escapees from the insane asylum that pays homage to the first, the bathroom scene at what appears to be a rest stop. But I love the twist of him sticking his hand over and dropping the teeth. That's such a memorable image. And if nothing else, we have one more iconic Michael Myers image that's going to come out of this film. But I have a lot of faith in Blumhouse. I'm really excited to see how the movie performs, and I can't wait for October to get here. Every time Ryan Turk mentions it on the Shockwaves podcast, I lose my mind a little bit because I'm just dying to see what they're talking about. But yeah, really excited about this trailer, and would love to hear what you guys think. Be sure to jump in the Gut Reactions Facebook group and drop your thoughts about the trailer there. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the discussion about I Know What You Did Last Summer.
The creator of Scream has done it again.
I think he's dead.
It was an accident.
And the critics are hooked. I Know What You Did Last Summer is an edge-of-your-seat thriller.
Oh my God, this isn't happening.
It's scarier than Scream. And will make you jump out of your seat.
Help him, he's gonna kill us!
Hang on for a wild terror ride.
What are you waiting for?
I Know What You Did Last Summer. Don't see it alone. Rated R.
Now, I had not seen I Know What You Did Last Summer until I got a phone call from one of the listeners, and who's someone who's a close friend of mine, and he talked about a story where he watched this film for the first time as a young boy. I'm going to go ahead and play that call for you now.
When I think of summer horror movies, I always think of one of the first ones I watched as a kid, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I mean, it's in the title. We were actually staying in a beach house in Mexico when me and my sisters watched that. I was like 9 at the time, and I had to sleep in this room by myself that had wide picture windows looking out over the beach where literally no one was around. And just the whole night, I just sat there freaked out that that guy was going to come in and just murder me and my family. But whenever I think about summer movies, that's what comes to mind. I Know What You Did Last Summer. What do you think of that?
So I love this story because it's always funny how horror movies affect you the first time you watch them, especially at a young age. I know the first time I watched Psycho, I always share the story about not wanting to shower with the curtain closed and things like that. Yeah, there's just something about watching a horror movie at a young age where even movies like this one that aren't flawless necessarily can have an unparalleled impact on you. And I think that's really neat. And I do think this movie has some genuine scares, and I think it really plays well for what it is. So I hadn't seen the movie until we started the Summer of Fear series with Wes Craven's Summer of Fear. And then when I got the call, it just seemed like I Know What You Did Last Summer really fit into the theme. Obviously, it takes place during the summer and kind of has that vibe you want in a summer horror movie. It really feels tonally in a lot of ways similar to both Stephen King's depictions of, small town USA with like Derry, Maine and things like that. And then it also has kind of the Amityville Island vibe going on with Jaws. It kind of has that just really homey, small town feel that's just really comforting, but also kind of frightening because, as we've learned from horror movies, small towns always have big secrets. So I was trying to think of how to break this movie down. I think I'm just going to be pretty simple and break it down to likes and dislikes because I had plenty of both. Like I said, this was based off my first viewing of the film, so there may be some things that people who have watched the film 60 times probably picked up on that I didn't. But this is kind of my hot take, as it were, just about the film. And anyway, I'll just go from there. Warning, there are going to be spoilers. I'm expecting that anyone listening to this has at least a basic understanding of the movie. And preferentially has seen it. So I'm going to just be talking pretty freely about spoilers. I'd recommend that you guys go ahead and give the movie a watch before listening to this because some of it's probably not going to make sense otherwise. But for me, the highlight of the film was definitely Jennifer Love Hewitt's performance, hands down. She was incredibly sympathetic. And after the event that kind of serves as a catalyst for the film, the moment where, 4 drunken teenagers hit this presumably innocent man with their car, it didn't seem like I would be able to really connect or feel any sympathy toward the characters as they inevitably would be picked off. And for the first few minutes after that, that's really the vibe I got. I didn't care for any of the characters. I thought, in a justice sense, they deserve whatever's going to happen to them. I really don't care about them. But Jennifer Love Hewitt plays this tortured, I don't know what to do. And from the very beginning, she's stuck in the middle of what is the right decision.
We're gonna fry no matter who takes the fall. Can we leave right now?
No way, are you crazy?
The grill's busted. There's blood everywhere. We can clean it up. Come on.
Listen to yourselves. No, we are going to the police.
We don't have time for your... You understand? We gotta move fast. Hey! Let's try to stay calm. Focus.
Don't you get it? If there's some of him on the car, there's some of the car on him. They're gonna trace it back to you. You're looking at a hit and run.
Then we dump the body.
You've lost it.
even though she morally makes the wrong choice, I think the way that it shows her grappling with it is really powerful, and she is just torn apart by this horrible event that happened last summer. In the same vein with casting, I really love Sarah Michelle Gellar in this. It was really fun seeing her. This would have came out as the second season of Buffy was on, but seeing her, who's usually playing this super heroine character, play sort of the Cordelia role is a ton of fun.
Well, Bob, at summer's end, I plan to move to New York City, where I'll pursue a career as a serious actress. It's my goal to entertain the world through artistic expression. Through art, I shall serve my country.
The other thing I liked was the kills definitely aren't as strong as Scream, but the fishhook is a very unique weapon of choice. And there were some fun moments with it. I think the visual of that's really unique. And especially, the number one kill in here is that first kill with Max in the freezer room on the pier. When you see him just get hit with it really quick and then pulled across the ice, leaving behind a trail of blood. That's really powerful. The other thing I really liked was the cinematography. Absolutely stellar. It's not as flat as most of the films coming out during that time. Even Scream had that 90s look where the aesthetic is a little flatter than it really should be. It doesn't have a lot of, that bright movie quality that we'd gotten so used to in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It just everything got really dreary and dark. And this movie's color palette is a little bit darker. It still has those steely blues and grays, but there's a lot of motion. There's a lot of vibrancy in the frame. I really love the shots where, especially where they're on the beach and you see the campfire giving this orange glow, you have the blue glow of the ocean, and then when the camera's moving or is set somewhere, there's always motion in the frame. So you have the waves coming in from the ocean, crashing down on the beach, you have the fire flickering. When you're in the small town, you have just all sorts of things always happening in the frame that are catching your eye. Even though the palette isn't necessarily bright and colorful, it's always busy but not overwhelming. It's just a very good balance. I'm not familiar with the cinematographer. I haven't seen anything else he shot aside from the Agent Cody Banks movies, which is a very different thematic style than this, but really stellar cinematography. And I also liked, I didn't write this in my notes, but one thing that I really liked was kind of the quippy dialogue. This movie doesn't go over the top into the self-referential realm. It's a lot more refined than that. But I really love how there's little quotes where I think in one part they reference Silence of the Lambs.
What if they're waiting for us? What if they recognize us? They could have a gun, shoot us dead.
It's been a year, Helen. They could have done that already.
Jodie Foster tried this and a skin-ripping serial killer answered the door.
The idea that they live in a world where horror movies exist. So many times in horror movies you have, whether it's a zombie movie where everyone says, "What is this?" and no one says, "This is zombies. We've never seen a zombie movie," It's a slasher movie and people are like, "Let's split up." All those things that we've seen played on Cabin in the Woods, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation. Yeah, that's right. I went there. All these things are present in this movie, and it just makes the world feel a lot more real. When you watch a horror movie and it's obvious the characters aren't familiar with any horror tropes, it really takes away believability. And so I just love the quick references they make. They don't go overboard with it, which is why it works. And really the organic chemistry between the cast is really solid. Aside from one or two characters, and that kind of gets into what I disliked. As far as what I disliked, like I just said, some of the casting. First and foremost, like a sore thumb, is Johnny Galecki. Now, Johnny Galecki is the best part of Big Bang Theory, a show that I'm not supremely fond of as of late. But he's really good in it, and he's horribly miscast here. I thought he just came off as silly and forced, playing kind of the rough and tough fisherman who's kind of got a problem with the rich kid. It just felt really bad, and I could see the character working with a different actor. With Johnny Galecki, it just doesn't feel legitimate. It just feels really forced.
Well, go figure. And I was just thinking to myself, whatever happened to that Barry Cox?
Hey, Max. Listen, can we talk a sec? Private?
Oh, what? This isn't private enough for you?
A little bit behind him is Freddie Prinze Jr., who I like him in moments, but other moments he just really doesn't work. He kind of ranges from passable to terribly, terribly bad. There's a scene where Jennifer Love Hewitt sees the body in the trunk with the crabs and all this stuff has been happening, and they find him, and he's acting shocked at everything that happened, and it's just a really cringy moment.
Look, he's after me too. I got a letter.
Oh, you got a letter. I got run over. Helen gets her hair chopped off. Julie gets a body in a trunk, and you get a letter? That's balanced.
What body? What are you talking
Drop
about?
the act. You killed Max. You took my jacket.
Max is dead?
Jealous to handle it.
I know I said some of the kills work, but on the flip side of that, there's a lot of kills that don't really pay off. I wish they would have went there a little bit more at some points. Even though this movie is an R rating, and it definitely goes for that in certain points, there's a lot of moments where they cut away where it just doesn't land the punch that Scream did with some of its kills. It really struggled in certain areas like that. I just wish they would have went there. Like I said, that ice block kill with Max, Jan Galecki's character, is so good, and I don't feel like they ever recaptured that instant shock of like, oh, I'm in this slasher movie. A lot of the rest they kind of cut away, and they just didn't really work. I don't know if that was a rush to get it out so soon after Scream, or what the reason, or if that was just an artistic choice, but I think they should have really, went for that kind of shocking violence at moments. Not necessarily gore, but just shocking violence at certain points. And ultimately, just getting into my final dislike, my biggest gripe was honestly the climax. I wish the killer would have been established sooner. The movie sets up a couple people that could potentially be the killer, and I think some of those threads would have been interesting to follow, but overall, I just wasn't impressed with who the killer ended up being. It just really wasn't the gut punch it should have been. Again, with Scream, it's such a shock, and part of what makes that movie is you're so shocked by the ending of that film that it just totally rocks your mind as a viewer. In this film, you're just kind of like, oh, that's who it is? Okay. Haven't seen him until now, but now I'm supposed to be scared of him. It really just falls apart there for me. And then on top of that, the pursuit that follows between the villain and the two surviving main characters at that point is really disappointing as well. Anything post-Scream, it feels dated and silly to have the characters kind of clumsily running around a boat and making stupid decisions. They're constantly leaving the killer unattended. They assume he's dead when, surprise, he's not. And the scenes just drag on with people tripping and falling. Now, obviously, Jennifer Love Hewitt's character is emotionally distraught, but I never buy that she's a really weak character. So seeing her just kind of make these stupid, clumsy decisions is really silly in the ending. And they happen so frequently that it just kind of loses believability. And seeing Freddie Prinze Jr.'s character getting knocked out of the boat and then doing this slow climb with the net, it just feels like it's all there to fluff up the rest of the film. Now, when it comes to final thoughts, I do certainly recommend I Know What You Did Last Summer. I do highly recommend people check out this movie. It's a very competent slasher. It really has a good aesthetic to it. The performances are pretty solid. But even though it has its weak missteps and things, it's certainly not on the level of Scream or some slashers in that vein. There's a lot there to chew on. A lot of things that you're definitely going to react to as a horror fan, as a film fan. A really good performance, again, by Jennifer Love Hewitt. I can't sing enough praise about that. And it's fun seeing Sarah Michelle Gellar play something other than the tough, rough and tough Slayer character that we got used to on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Overall, really good film. And a great addition to this series, Summer of Fear. Now, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of this series and for listening to Gut Reactions podcast in general. I really appreciate it, and the feedback you guys have been giving is phenomenal. I know I just put out a survey in the group asking for some feedback, and I'm already trying to implement some of that stuff. Hopefully that came through in the episode. But anytime you guys want to leave any feedback on the show, be sure to send a message through Facebook, through Instagram. Be sure to call the number that'll be in the show notes of this episode, and leave a message, bring up suggestions. And speaking of suggestions, I need you guys to call in and recommend films for this Summer of Fear series. I know I've already had a couple recommendations, but it would be really helpful to just have as many voices as I can. You can leave feedback about this episode, talk about why I'm wrong about something, talk about why I'm right about something, talk about where we agree or disagree, and I'd love to incorporate your voice messages into the episode. But anyway, the only other way I'd really like for you to support the show is to join the Facebook group, like the Facebook page, follow on Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media platform you want to. The group's really growing into something nice. There's a lot of good discussion going on there. And just talk about the show. Talk about movies that you love. Ultimately, I want this gut reaction show to lead to more discussion about horror films from horror fans like myself. And then lastly, if you haven't already, go ahead and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. That helps bump me up in the ranking and lets people know why they should listen to the show. Anyway, I appreciate you guys listening to the show and hope that you'll tune in again next week for the next installment of the Summer of Fear series here on Gut Reactions.